Colum, if you're happy enough, I'd like to dive right in. Why don't we start at the very beginning? You joined the SDLP, as I understand, in 1998 at the age of only 14. Even for a politician, that's a very early start. There must have been, is that a political family, Colum, or certainly a family that's not adverse to politics?
Well, I suppose, I mean, we're from Derry, and they're not a party political family, but my father was a union rep and all of that, and my grandfather was active in the civil rights movement and was, I think, hit over the head on the 5th of October, like many other people on Duke Street, and we just had a sense, I suppose, growing up of of a belief in justice and civil rights and peace. And John Hume was always a huge influence in our house and in our town and my school, to Collins College, and he was kind of everywhere. And I even at that young age, and I know it sounds strange at 14 to be joining a political party, but I was just a very ordinary and normal teenager, but politics was something I was interested in. Friend of our family's, Giovanni Doran, was involved in the SDLP and asked me if I was always kind of having a go at him and telling him all the things I thought the party were doing wrong, and he asked me would I come out and campaign during the referendum campaign for the Good Friday Agreement. So I did, and I was kind of bitten by the bug. I just fundamentally believed in Hume's and others' analysis that I was a very strong nationalist, but I believed that killing somebody for it wasn't a good idea, that you had to build peace, and the Good Friday Agreement seemed to me like a moment for young people to get involved.
You said you kind of campaigned during the Good Friday Agreement referendum. What do you mean by that? I mean, were you at the front doors? Were you holding lots of leaflets while other people were at the front doors? What can a 14-year-old do in an all-island referendum?
I suppose it depends what kind of 14-year-old you are. I was a fairly cheeky one, I think, and we were knocking doors, and the SDLP mounted a pretty big effort during the referendum campaign. A lot of other people didn't bother, but we did. I remember I started off kind of walking beside people and listening, and then I asked, could I knock a door myself, and they said go ahead. And we were in the Brandywell in Derry, near the Bauxite, fairly Republican area, and they knocked a door, and guy said to me, be careful of the language, but basically get off my effing porch. And I said, well, what's wrong with you? He said, you can take that having Good Friday Agreement with you as well, or there'll be consequences. So that was the first door.
Some things never change. Yeah.
No, well, exactly. I think the next night somebody nearly threw up on me on their way out, pushed me when I knocked the door, pushed me past and out of the way, and then they vomited in their front yard. So it was a baptism of fire, but it was actually fantastic. I was around camp, in Hume's company, around with Mark Durkin and many other people, and just got a real sense of a party that had achieved something immense, and it was great to be around.
On one hand, Colum, it's really impressive to see young people involved in politics as young as 14 or whatever age, engaged in that process, exercising their democratic right. I suppose you could look at it another way, which is to say that, is there something that we shouldn't be encouraging about young people joining a political party so early, tying yourself to a party, perhaps not giving enough thought to alternative viewpoints? Now, that's not directly at you, obviously, but just this idea of being able to hear voices from across the spectrum as you grow up. And at age 14, it's impossible to get a full grasp of those issues. I mean, did you flirt with other parties, other brands of politics?
Not really. As I say, I was just totally bought into the philosophy and the analysis of the problem and the solution, and I think John got it right. And of course, our main political opponents, I think, were proven wrong in their strategy and tactics around how you change society and how you change the country. So I became more convinced as I went through. I always, though, questioning and critical at times of the party, never kind of fanatical in that way, but convinced about the general thrust of things. I wonder about that, actually, about young people and whether they should be too involved too early. There was never, when I became involved, I don't think I joined the party, as such, for quite a while. I was around the party. And people were always very clear: don't be, don't do too much. Don't be. I remember Pat Hume during my GCSEs banning me from canvassing during a particular election, whichever one that was. I obviously ignored her, but anyway, I think she'd have been very cross if she had known I was out knocking doors during my exams. But look, it was, I think young people should keep an open mind and should be broad. I think they should get involved in political activity. We obviously love seeing young people coming into the party, but I don't think a political party should try and tie somebody in at that age. I think they should allow them the opportunity to think very carefully about their allegiances.
And then your next step was you started Latin American studies, I think, at Liverpool. And sorry, this is a cruel joke to make. You maybe should have listened to Pat Hume a little bit more, because as I understand it, you were quite involved in politics and decided you decided to come home anyway. Is that a fair?
Well, yeah, I was very involved in Liverpool in the, I was very involved in the anti-war movement during the Iraq War, and we were students obviously, and spent an awful lot of time protesting and enjoying ourselves as well. My studies weren't really at the top of my agenda, and that's not something I'm telling people at Queen's to follow. But it was a fairly emotional time around the Iraq War, and we were just very engaged in that. I came home. I wasn't sure really, to be honest. I don't think I ever should have been doing that particular degree course. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then I was involved again in the party, obviously, and ended up running for election when I was 22, kind of not really supposed to win the seat and won it fairly handily, and that was the end of that.
I mean, it's odd then, because you were involved in, as so many people in that period of time, the anti-war politics and movement, that you would go on to lead what is the sister party to the UK Labour Party, which at that stage was the major political force behind the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. When you were at that age, did you have doubts about the relationship between the SDLP and Labour, or how that relationship would work at all?
I mean, of course, the SDLP MPs voted against the war and argued against it and spoke against it. I remember being very, very angry, actually, with the Labour government. I couldn't understand how a Labour government could do that. I remember going to a Labour Party conference in Blackpool at the time, and made my feelings fairly clear to Tony Blair at an event he had for young people, which didn't go down too well in the hall. But I would imagine, I think I was probably on the side of most Labour Party members at that moment. I think Blair did an awful lot of good. He was a very good Prime Minister. He won 3 elections, probably would have won 4. But and there's a lot you could say about those years, but the Iraq War was, I mean, it was devastating for anybody who wanted to see a more just kind of world, and it was just impossible to understand, and I still don't understand how they ended up in that situation. But
let's jump forward in time. You mentioned then getting a seat on the council, and then youngest mayor of Derry in 2007. I asked this of another one of our guests not too long ago. Being that young, I mean, is there a vulnerability that comes in there? Was that a daunting experience? Do you look back on it now and say, oh, I wish I was older, I wish I'd waited?
No, I actually really enjoyed it. It's probably my favourite ever job in politics. It was fantastic because I think it was important. Derry's a very young city. We were going in to bid for the City of Culture. In my first week, I chaired the bid team. We presented in Liverpool. We ended up winning. Just a couple of days before that, we had the Savile report being published. I was the mayor for that, and I'd been involved in the Bloody Sunday campaign, and I was a member of the Bloody Sunday Trust and all of that. And it was a momentous kind of time for us, but I think it was important to have somebody young, and it was refreshing actually at that time, because that hadn't really happened before, to have somebody young, kind of leading the city and civically, and it was just a very interesting time. I loved it. I really loved standing up for the people of Derry in that kind of role, which was, I don't think I was very apolitical in the role, but it was less political, I suppose. We had quite a bit of dissident violence at the time, and there was a lot going on. I don't regret it at all, actually, and I think I probably was able to give it a lot more because I didn't have kids and all of that, and it was a fantastic time.